Welcome everybody to our Scholar in Residence series, episode 2. And tonight, it's amazing to have Racheli Frankel with us. She's very much in demand. She's had an extremely busy week with Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. It was, on the one hand, a challenge to get her, but only because she needed to find space in her diary. On the other hand, it was easy because she's very kind and sensitive and said yes, as she always does whenever she can. So Racheli, you must be exhausted, but that's part of you sharing your reflections and inspiration on this very meaningful week. Thank you for joining us. Racheli, it's all yours.
Right. Okay. The truth is, the title was so open-ended that it was very hard to decide what to do, and in fact, I'm gonna do this the kind of freehand because it's been a very not busy as far as being in demand, and not that at all. Just a very intense, emotional, busy holiday week. Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, and supposedly we're all home, and you know but we're actually all working from home and Zooming and trying to get our kids to learn on all these strange far distance learning systems. So everything's very, very crazy. So what I'm actually apologizing here. I'm used to teaching with a source sheet and you know, discussing Torah, and somehow this very general title brought me to just say, okay, I want to share with you things about the experience here in Israel these days, and in different ways. You know, some of my world is anyhow, it speaks Torah when it wants to express itself. So it will be more a freehand conversation, and at whatever point or halfway, I'd love for you know, to get input from you, and you know, maybe respond to things people write in chat or say, or I see the group isn't huge, so we can actually talk if we want. Okay. Tov. The one very, very basic thing, and it's very known and not new to anybody, is the way the structure of these dates is. You know, we come straight from Pesach, and then there's Yom HaShoah, and then there's Yom HaZikaron, and there's exactly a week between Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron. Depends how it works with the calendar. And there's I'm trying to remember the translation, but there's a very famous limerick, Chamshir, that says, you know, 2 dates together every year, to make it clear beyond a doubt what it costs us with the state and what it costs without. So this notion of Yom HaZikaron is extremely intensive for anybody in Medinat Israel, but the knowledge that everything we're talking about is 1 day of work in Auschwitz. I know it's a simple truth, but it's something that every year we remind ourselves of again and again. And the fact that the calendar is structured like that, I'm not even sure they thought of it ahead of time, but I know it has that experience for Jews around the world too. In Israel, it's intense. You can't just not notice it every year. So so in a sense, I feel, you know, beyond being between Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron, it's also between Parashat Shmini and Parashat Achrei Mot. the whole 3 dates are between these 2 parshiyot, and in both parshiyot we hear about the tragic death of the sons of Aaron HaKohen. And again, I think it's something many people feel, but I'm putting it into words here. When this happens, and we hear in Parshat Shmini, and there's a moment there in time where apparently Aaron HaKohen was about to, very naturally, leave everything, drop his work as this was right in the first week of Mishkan, Chanukat HaMizbech, everything. So there was a moment in time that he saw the tragedy, he realized, and the natural response was probably to leave everything and to go weep for his sons. And there the Moshe Rabbeinu tells him, Bikrovai Kadesh. Now, often Bikrovai Kadesh is understood that Bikrovai is his sons, only the special ones, the close ones to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But if you look carefully at Rashbam there, he says, Bikrovai Kadesh, that's you, Aharon. Okay, it's on you now. This is the time to shut up, to keep quiet, and to continue your work. And then we hear, apparently, Aaron, and actually Rashbam says, Aaron bikesh to leave everything and to go weep for his sons. And Moshe tells him, Bikrovai Kadesh, shut up and keep working. And yeah, it's a little bit like how just go in England, keep calm and keep walking, something like that. So then we hear Vaydom Aaron, and it always catches us, breathless to hear Vaydom Aaron after such a unthinkable tragedy. And I feel that we come after a few generations that told themselves we have to keep silent and keep up the work. And these are people that told themselves, in a very inner way, shut up and keep working, both because some of the things they endured in their lifetime were beyond, if you would open the doors to that pain, to trying to express it, to let it out, the wave would have been so overwhelming that it might have washed people away. And people's choices, and this is more than a couple of generations, was to keep quiet, to keep silent, and to keep up the work. The second part of it is that the work that had to be done was just tremendous, beyond, it's hard to believe in human magnitude. People, they say about Noach that he saw olam banui v'charev v'banui. He saw a world that was built and then that was totally destroyed, and then you have to rebuild it. And waking up, definitely after World War II, to a world that, from a Jewish perspective, it's post the Mabul. It's like the great waters washed everything, and the world is destroyed. And people pick themselves up. And this is that generation, but also the previous generations that came to Eretz Yisrael and found here nothing. And kept quiet with tons of inner weight, and just did the work, built a country, established a state, rebuilt a destroyed world. On personal level, people rebuilt families, people started over, beyond words. I think in our generation, we have the privilege, and it's a little bit of a, in Hebrew you say a pinuk, a bit of pampering, but it's in a good way. The privilege to say we can weep and then we can continue the work. And we find ourselves weeping from time to time because still in human lives, there are prices, and there's hardship, and there's pain. And we can't even start dealing with Yom HaShoah. We can do our best to remember and to understand. But when we talk about Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, I think what we're telling ourselves is, in this day and age, we can afford to weep and we can afford these tears because so much of the work has already been done. And of course, there's so much more work to do. And it's a good place to come to where you can, yes, there's pain, yes, there's prices, and yes, you can mention them, and you can feel them, but then right afterwards is Yom Ha'atzmaut, celebrating what we have and the responsibility and all the rest of the work. So that's one thing I feel very strongly. Actually, this is two. It's a relationship between Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron. What it costs us with the state and what it costs without, and this issue of the privilege to be in a time and age where we can actually express the pain and then say, okay, and now back to work. Yom HaZikaron itself is, I remember almost 6 years ago, my son was kidnapped and murdered, and the next, because our Azkarais, it all happened on Tetvav Sivan, that's a week after Shavuot, and they were searching for them for 18 days, and so we have, the Azkara is really Tetvav Sivan, and we have what is for us Yemei Hodaya, days of thanks, on Gimel Tammuz and Bet Tammuz when they were found. And we got to bury them, Bekever Israel, and because it's so close to Yom HaZikaron, it took almost a full year until the first Yom HaZikaron came up. And when it came up, I was very surprised by all the attention we suddenly got, and the question of so how do you feel on Yom HaZikaron, or somehow I didn't expect this at all. And the reason I didn't expect it is my parents, again, I'm very, very privileged, okay? My parents made Aliyah 1955. That was many years before I was born. And, maybe I'll stop and say a word about them. They, my mother's family moved from Czechoslovakia to New York when she was 5. My father, they escaped from Vienna to Switzerland, from Switzerland to Paris, from Paris to London in the Blitz. They spent some time in London during the Blitz, and then they crossed the Atlantic when the German submarines were still there. And my father spent 10 years in America. And the thinking of, recently I had to write up his biography. He's still, Baruch Hashem, they should both live for many more good years in Ramat Gan. I was saying, oh, well, actually they're refugees. And I understood again that it's all, we live in a world of narratives. So it's all about the story you tell yourself. Because yes, they were refugees. They left everything behind, and they ran from country to country, from country to country. But every place they spent more than 2 weeks. My grandmother, his Jewish mother, ran after him, making sure that he learns and that she finds a private teacher for him, and that the Jewish community makes sure. He stayed alone for 6 months in Paris with a younger sister. He was 9, she was 7, and they made sure that the Jewish community there makes sure that he learns. And every place they were, it was never, oh, my destroyed childhood. It was eventually, when he got to New York, from the ages of 15 and 25 when he made Aliyah with my mother, he already had a PhD in chemistry and a smicha from Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik for rabbinical things. So, and he became, a professor at Bar Ilan University because he arrived for the first day of Bar Ilan. So this issue of being a refugee, and I'm saying this because there are other models of refugees where, I don't know if from inward or from outward, a whole people is forced to hold on to this refugee identity and not grow out of it. Yeah. look at Jewish generations. We've been refugees generation after generation, and we're not clinging to the victimhood. Okay, we're clinging to the learning, to the Torah, to the education. You know, to move on, to grow. Okay, so I got carried away speaking about my parents, but coming back to Yom HaZikaron, so I was saying I'm very, very privileged to grow up in Israel. Life in New York, and go through everything it took to come here in 55. And whenever I meet someone that makes this choice now, I have so much reverence for them, really. I tell them, you're giving your children the biggest gift in the world. Okay, I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't thank my parents for the ability to grow up here and to raise my children here. Okay, I'm allowed to say this because we're talking about Yom HaZikaron Yom HaAtzmaut. What did you expect me to be? Not Zionist? Anyhow, yeah. So growing up here, Yom HaZikaron is always your own. Okay, Yom HaZikaron is not some kind of something to a time to empathize with the families of the lost soldiers or terror victims. It's not a time to stand together by someone else appreciating their grief, or it's not a gesture. Okay, it's something that we all go through together, feeling the connection, feeling I think even recommitting to the fact that we're diverse, but we're together and we're responsible for each other. And you know, looking at those faces of the young smiling people, that mostly young terror victims, come in all ages. And it's not this day of indulging on pain or trying to build up a culture of martyrs. And again, there are places in the world that do build up this idea. And now, again, Yahadut has plenty of requirements for Mesirut Nefesh when the time comes, but nobody wants you to push a person to such situations. On the contrary, I think what people recommit to on Yom HaZikaron is to life, is to being able to celebrate life, to make our society worthy of the sacrifices and the prices it paid, to make the communal stronger and livelier. So when they asked me, oh, so how do you feel in Yom HaZikaron now? I was very surprised, because it's not like until now Yom HaZikaron was a gesture to some other families, and now I got into the story. It's by definition here, I think there's a lot of gentleness and sensitivity, the way people relate to families of the bereaved families on Yom HaZikaron. But I think the basic experience is not that. It's the shared experience. What else? And again, the basic idea also is not to promote sacrifice. It's to promote life. Sometimes you have to make your sacrifices while living, definitely. But you know, you give up your time, you give up yourself, you give up your heart, definitely. But Mesirut Nefesh could be shown in so many ways. Devotion could be shown in so many ways, and mostly it's about promoting life. Okay.
Racheli, can I just jump in for a minute?
Yeah.
You're telling a very personal story, and we appreciate the freestyle manner rather than it being scripted. It's very it's heart to heart and informal, and we're really gaining from that. my question just at this point is whether there was a period following the tragedy where you felt, actually, I'm not up to being myself. I don't want to go back into the classroom and passionately teach my students. I don't want to believe in all this great dream of Israel and life and hope. What you're speaking now is incredibly inspiring, and this is where you're at. But were there stages to it, or did you just bounce back straight away and say, this is from God and hey ho, let's carry on?
So, okay. First of all, there's the you know, the general, the Klal Yisrael narrative, and there's the personal experience. And I think all along we understood, and okay, I want to say another thing in a minute, but we understood that this is part of the bigger story, that Naftali was murdered because he was Jewish, because he lived in Eretz Israel. And in that sense, it was a given, okay? The thing itself, okay? It's not like I told myself, oh, if we only lived in New York where my parents came from, okay? Not that life in New York is so much safer, but a couple of nights ago, I had a conversation. I hope you people didn't hear it, otherwise I'm repeating myself. And I was reminded of this event where I was in Johannesburg, and somebody wanted to present me to some young children. So we started talking about how dangerous it is in Israel. And I was saying, are you serious? You know, you in Johannesburg, you have beautiful houses, but it's all behind barbed wires, etc., etc. My 4-year-old kid walks himself to kindergarten. Yeah. So I didn't have the hirurei kfira as far as what are we doing in Eretz Israel. That didn't happen. Now, in time, grief can go, and I'm not judgmental. You're asking me about my personal experience. I'm saying personally that wasn't an issue. In general, and this has nothing to do with, you know, a person could experience loss or grief or bereavement in many circumstances, and life is complicated. Sometimes the pain is unbearable, and sometimes you want to go under the quilt and say, I'll get out of here in 6 months, maybe. But I was, again, everybody with their own circumstances. One of the things that was most potent by us was that we all had, from the 3 families, we all had very young children, and you have a 4-year-old climb all over you, and they need what they need, and they don't care about your stuff. And so the power, life pulls you back in so many ways. Besides, we had a lot of support. Besides, we had, I'm not saying that every step on the way is definitely not easy. Definitely, it is painful. But I think our core experience is that we're very blessed. And yes, there's. You bring me to very personal things, so I'll say it in a personal way. For me, the big deal was saying, you can feel pain. You don't have to become your pain. You can feel sorrow. You don't have to become your sorrow. In fact, in Corona days, I tend to say, one can feel anxiety. They don't have to become their anxiety. Yeah. In our inner landscape, there's so many, different emotions and different experiences and dreams and disappointments and successes and failures and the whole bunch. And for us, it's also a lot of blessing. Really, I think it's like the core of the way we experience it. And many times it's about taking, a person could take a photograph and focus on their pain, and it fills up the whole frame. And sometimes it's natural to do that. But most of the time, if a person could use a wide lens, I know it works for me, okay? I'm not presuming to know anything for anybody else. But I use a wide lens on my life, so the pain, the wound is still there, smack in the center. It's not going anywhere. But there's so much more. There are colors, there are adventures, there are challenges, there's blessing, there's really a wide lens grasps everything. And to me, it mostly invokes gratitude, and that's a big deal for me. Maybe I'll pull out a bit from the personal point, but I'll tell you things I feel very, very strongly. Yesterday, I'll say this time of year is a busy time of year as far as traveling. Last Shabbat I was supposed to be in Chicago, and Shavuot we were supposed to be in London. It's amazing communities around, and somehow it all there were many quiet months in the winter, and this time of year becomes very, very busy. And of course, all the travel plans were canceled. But some of these things we do by Zoom. So yesterday, my family we're all in social isolation. So we had our, the biggest mitzvah on Yom Ha'atzmaut is a barbecue, a mangal, and we were having the barbecue down in our garden. And I came up here to speak to kids in Chicago. So at some point, I actually spoke about gratitude. Yom Ha'atzmaut, what could you speak about if not gratitude? And at some point, I turned the camera. Now it's dark, so I won't do it. And I showed them, the valley you see out my window. That's the biblical Emek Ayalon. Okay, Emek Ayalon is Shemesh beGiv'on Dom ve'Ereach be'Emek Ayalon. It's amazing miracles happened in the time of Yeshua. But the fact that I can tell you, this is where I live, okay? This is my backyard. And behind us is the biblical Emek Ayalon. That's a miracle for itself, okay? And you can see down here, I was showing them the trees. You see the trees? The lemon and the carob and the shesek, I think it's called limquat, and the mulberry. I have a whole bunch of fruit trees in my garden. And these are not just trees. These are trees that heard the words of the prophet. Yechezkel says that Vatem Hare Israel, and when he speaks to the mountains and the trees, and he says, when you recognize my people coming, you're going to give your fruit. And we can all open Mark Twain, 1867, I think it is, and he speaks about this heartbroken, desolate, barren country. And the people came back, and the land responded, and the trees are full of fruit. It's springtime. And, these are not just fruit. These are fruit of Geula. These are, it's not just a lemon. It's a lemon of redemption. Now, and I can go on and on, yeah? We speak about v'techazena einenu b'shuvcha leTzion. So really the bracha of avodah in Tfilat Amidah, and when you daven Shmona Esrei, it asks for us to be able to see the full Geula, to see Bet HaMikdash, to see Avodat Hashem returning to Jerusalem. But in this generation, saying v'techazena einenu b'shuvcha leTzion also means give us the eyes to see what's in front of us, to understand the meaning, the context, the historical meaning of it, to actually, sometimes you see something and we take it for granted, we let it pass next to us, right by. And in this generation, sometimes we just have to pray for Hashem to give us the eyes to understand what we're seeing, the heart to understand what we're seeing. That so much of it has already happened. Now, I actually have a clear memory that in the Beit Midrash that Lauren started, we spoke about this issue of Chizkiyahu HaMelech and his ability to give praise, and sometimes the inability has its prices, and I'll say this. Okay, there's a famous story of Rabbi David of Lelov. He's like from 200 years ago, in the time of beginning of Chassidut, a little after the beginning of Chassidut, and I might be wrong with the timing, but there's a story. He comes to be a guest in some house, and they put him up to sleep in the living room, and there's this clock there that's ticking all night, and he can't sleep. So in the morning, he goes over to his host and he says, "Tell me, what's the story with this clock?" And the host says, "Oh, we're very proud of this." Every clock I hear ticking, I hear it say, "Tick, tick, tick, you're 1 second closer to your death." And this clock was saying, "Tick, tick, tick, you're 1 second closer to Geula, to redemption." Now, what I mean here is sometimes things happen, and if you don't understand what you're going through, we're going to lose the potential that's in it. Okay, maybe many generations have redemptive potential, but maybe like Chizkiyahu Melech, you miss out on it. We take it for granted. We think it's natural. We think all that. Understanding the context, understanding the potential, understanding what this could mean makes all the difference regarding, are we going to be zoche to bring it to its full fulfillment. Now, I mentioned my parents. I have to say, my whole life, when we say Medinat Israel Reshit Smichat Geulatenu, and we say it mildly, it's not Geulatenu, it's not Smichat Geulatenu, it's Reshit Smichat Geulatenu, the beginning of the starting of our redemption. My father says, Halevai, like Bezrat Hashem, I hope so, maybe, yeah. And for some ears, that could sound like blasphemy. What? You don't understand what we say? And I don't see it that way. I see what he's saying is unbelievable miracles have been happening. We've had Siyata Dishmaya, we've had Shivat, we have people here coming from 100 countries, but it's not in our pocket. It's not, it's not a signed deal. It chas v'chalila could be spoiled. If we can, just like, Vayayim Shama says, we could be unworthy of it, okay? We can bail out from the work that still needs to be done. We could be Khalila, an unjust society that doesn't deserve this process to continue. So we see with our eyes, we understand with our heart, but that doesn't mean that, the deal is done. It means that there's so much more work to do. You know what I wanted to share? Let's see if I managed to share what I meant to. If not, it's only 2 minutes. Let's see if I can do it. I'll send you the link, but I just wanted to show you 2 minutes from minute 4 to minute 6. It's not so important. It just, with all the complexity, and there's plenty of complexity, when Yom Ha'atzmaut comes and we say Hallel, I truly feel like opening Yechezkel and reading the prophet's words. And in that movie, Israel, Do You See the Miracle, that was created 2 years ago, there are 2 minutes where that's what they do. They say the phrases from Yechezkel, and they have the right graphics to remind us what we're talking about. So I'll send you the URL, and anyone who wants to watch it is welcome to watch. The truth is, I can continue talking, but if people want to bring up stuff, I'll gladly respond.
Racheli,
Just in terms of timing, in 15 minutes, our nation here in the UK will stand on our doorsteps to show gratitude to the National Health Service and key workers for the miracles that they're helping.
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
we've got a few minutes. We've got a few minutes for questions, and then for you to wrap it up. I think Lauren has got something to bring to your attention.
yeah.
So Lauren, just a second. So first of all, gratitude is the most important. So that's in 15 minutes, right? So we will finish in 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. תמיד תענוג לשמוע ממך, אז תודה. I wanted to ask you, I think at the moment, prayer is more powerful and significant, and ironically, without being in our shuls, it's taken on a new meaning for many people. And I'm constantly reminded of that moment, which I think we've discussed before together, when during those days, the 18 days before the boys were found, you met with the group of, or you bumped into the group of children at the Kotel, who were praying for the return of the boys. And you said to them, just if something bad happens, I don't want to put the wrong words here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but just to bring everybody into the picture that's not familiar with the story, you said to them, I just want you to remember that God is not an ATM machine. And that became something that, went viral and took on a huge meaning in terms of a lot of people rethinking prayer. And so I just wondered if maybe you could just share some insights at this point, that I think a lot of us are rethinking prayer or finding new meaning in prayer, because we're challenged in different circumstances. So perhaps you could share something with us on that.
So, that was one of the cases where something you're totally unaware of and you're just, responding to something, and it, you said, become viral. We're into viruses these days. It became meaningful, and that is by the grace of God. You say something, you have no idea. So they were actually saying, we're praying, we're giving tzedakah, everything's going to be okay. And I told them, look, we're very optimistic. We believe he's going to come back. But just if something bad happens, you should remember that God doesn't work for us. He's not our employee. And somehow I think because of the simplicity of those words, because it's such a common sense idea, and because it was beforehand when we were still very hopeful and optimistic, and not apologetically explaining what had already happened. So because of those circumstances, it really took off. And interestingly, I've heard from people saying to me, oh, and then I reminded myself that God doesn't work for me. So okay, sometimes we need simple truths to be stated. It's definitely amazing. There are so many silver linings against, around these Corona days, and people rediscovering their prayer in different ways is one of the very, very profound processes. And I'll say for me, it was never an ATM machine. It was never, you put in Psalms one way and you get results the other. It's about standing before your Creator, and the standing itself has so much meaning. People would relate it as a monologue. You try to turn it into a dialogue because reality talks to you in many, many ways. But the idea that there is Shomat Tfilah, someone is listening, but that doesn't mean that you get any instant results. Most of the results is the way you define yourself as a person standing in prayer. And as many have already said, if Corona taught us something, it's about how fragile we are, how vulnerable we are. And it's not so bad to realize that we're vulnerable. It connects us to the reality of our life, how interdependent we are, codependent, how life could turn upside down in a day. It's these are things that are they startle you, but they're kind of a reality check. We somehow we have this idea that with enough technology and enough medicine and everything, we're all going to live forever. Humility, but that's not a bad thing. It's more of some of our paddings are shed off, and we get to deal with the real realities of life. I think for many of us, the big deal is lack of control, and a big deal here is to let go of some of our constant need to control every detail in our life. And on the other hand, one of our main tools to deal with it is to find small patches of control, small challenges, small pieces of time, small things that we could decide for ourselves and make them happen. So this balance is a very big deal, and it has to do with the greater picture of prayer, like you said, because everything is startled and shooken up. and there's a lot to say about people's experience praying alone, or people's experience, women's experience having a minion right out their window and finding themselves sometimes praying with the street minion. It depends on your local situation. I just want to give a chance if somebody was thinking of saying something.
Anyone with a question or comment?
Hi, thank you for coming to talk to us. You've got an amazingly positive outlook on life and a lovely smile. I just wanted to say thank you. It's very interesting, and it's always interesting to hear how someone copes with a tragedy like you did and like you have. So thank you. That's really no questions. Yeah.
It's really amazing to speak to everybody, and that you have, you know, the availability to sit down and have such a conversation. I just want to tell you, I when I originally thought what I want to talk about, so I thought I'll speak a little bit about Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, whatever, and then I had a list, which I won't go in, but of silver linings as far as Israeli society, things that happened over the last, 6 weeks, where people found the solidarity, the ability, the resources, the ingenuity to come up with new innovations and new and even to the extent of printing 3-dimensional inhalators, or all the high-tech people and the volunteers, and even sensitive things like, because of the nature of Haredi society in Israel, the ultra-Orthodox society in Israel, it was very clear that there will be an outburst there because things went slower and the community is very close and crowded. And when that happened, the first response was almost anti-Semite, the kind of anti-Semitism that Jews have for each other. Oh yeah, you people that are horrible things. But then over time, so many other sides of it were exposed. Soldiers were taking care of some cities, some Haredi cities were quarantined totally as a city. And the people giving out the food were soldiers and police forces. And there was like a new respect to an old Haredi woman that they knew was a Holocaust survivor in a totally Haredi setting that doesn't usually stand on the siren because it's a goyish thing to do. Or yesterday on Yom HaAtzmaut, you had the Air Force flying over Mayane Shua, that's a hospital in the center of Bnei Brak that's doing hard work in these days, and you had a lot of the staff there that is also from Bnei Brak, standing saluting to the Air Force airplanes flying over their heads in a gesture of respecting each other. And so many, when it started out so bad as far as the way the crisis in the Haredi society was received by journalists, and over time there's so many connections and things growing within that we truthfully, even in that specific point, and I had a list of 10 other points, you don't know where this is, what the end result will be. It could be that there'll be a lot of good results in the end of this process. Okay, I think your doctors and your nurses and your MTA, everybody there, the caregivers really deserve your salute. So I'll just thank you for the pleasure of meeting you, even if it's long distance. And Bezrat Hashem, I hope to see you people some other time, maybe in London, when we start flying again.
Amen. Racheli, thank you so much. This was all about your reflections and inspiration from the week of Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. But through this, you've given us plenty to reflect on and a huge amount of inspiration. So thank you for.
You know what? If I can say 5 words, I really that word is very scary to me. I don't know what inspiration means. Definitely, if you say it has something to do with me, I don't know about that. But I have a close friend, not a close friend, someone I met somewhere through a close friend, someone I know that had met Rav Steinsaltz on the street. And Rav Adin Steinsaltz, Steinsaltz Gemara, great person. And he said, Rabbi, I read your book. It was so inspirational. And Rav Steinsaltz is a bit of a cynical person. He said, really? It inspired you to do what? So that's our take-home message.
I set you up for that. Thank you for what you do, the way you do it, and for having the commitment to keep on doing just that. And thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.